Hello and welcome to The Executives. In this episode, I am joined by someone who was the Chief Financial Officer for a US-based Fortune 500 company and also the Managing Director of a Pan-European asset management group. He is Mr. Guillaume Pracht. Mr. Pracht, welcome very much to the program, and you are now the Managing Director of Euro Investors.
Yes, thank you for being there. And Euro Investors is the European Federation of Investors, about 45 national associations throughout Europe, including Boread of Turkey now, and about behind 2 million investors, individual investors.
What is the reason for having the group? What is the function of the group?
This group was created in 2009, just after the 2008 financial crisis. I think everyone recognized, including the governments and the European authorities, that there had been a quite unbalanced influence between financial services providers on the one side and financial services users, especially investors on the other side, vis-à-vis the financial policies in Europe.
You're also a member of the European Commission's Expert Forum for Financial Services Users.
Yes.
What does that forum actually do? What's its function?
This is the precise purpose is to advise the European Commission financial policy designers on the point of view of financial services users. So it's quite important that we are there.
Well, the soon-to-be-released legislative framework for the packaging of retail investment products, or PRIPS, Brussels says that even though it's to be released, it still might not be right and might need some tinkering with. So why would they release it in the first place?
Exactly, that's quite surprising, because this is an idea from the Commission. Now it dates back from 2007, so it took time to take shape. There's been an official consultation that was closed in January, and now I hear the same thing as you did, is that they have been having second thoughts, it seems, which is a pity, because the idea was very good, which was to harmonize all investor protection rules, whatever the retail investment product is, which is not the case right now in Europe.
In terms of that level of protection, what does it actually cover? Is it corporate governance or is it transparency? What areas does it cover?
It's especially transparency, also prevention of conflicts of interest, quality of information, advice duty. So it's all the selling practices, basically, of retail investment products, from equities to funds to life insurance policies, etc.
Well, since it is legislation, how do governments buy into that legislation?
That's another issue. So there's been currently a review of what they call the Markets in Financial Instruments Directive at the European Union level. And one of our responses is that although there are very good provisions on investor protection, especially in terms of fair information, advice duty, prevention of conflicts of interest, it's not enough enforced at the member states level.
I was going to ask you that question next, actually. How is it policed? How can it be enforced?
Well, I think the national authorities, national financial authorities, should be much more proactive in checking that the providers are actually implementing these provisions.
We talked earlier about the economic downturn which generated from 2008 to this very day. Now, the world hasn't really recovered in any significant fashion. So what sort of criteria do your members look for when choosing an investment?
Well, first, they would like to have clear guidance from the providers. And that's one big issue, is that very often it is not clear enough, not transparent enough. And also, I must say, quite a few financial intermediaries do not really fully understand the products themselves, especially structured products and complex products, which was part of the financial crisis to start with. They're still on the market.
You mentioned earlier that one of your members is a company here in Turkey. If we take a look at the Turkish economy, generally speaking, Turkey didn't fare too badly during the economic downturn. But what safeguards are in place in Turkey now that could subscribe to getting close to that legislation that we just spoke about?
I think, yes, as you said, Turkey did quite well, actually, in the last few years in economic terms. I think Turkey is now at a really turning point and very interesting time. The stock exchange seems to have taken a new growth in the last 2 years. You had a lot of IPOs, etc. So I think it's the right time to make sure that you get and you keep investors' confidence in the Turkish market. And that's, I think, the time, yes, to check whether in terms of transparency, in terms of minority shareholders' rights, investors' rights, indemnification in case of scandals or misbehaves, that it is, yes, I would say, comparable at least to the European Union provisions.
Well, there's a lot of interest in Turkey now. The European Central Bank and various ratings agencies are rating Turkey's financial position at just below investment level. But that doesn't seem to be stopping many investors coming to Turkey. So what criteria do you think they look for in a country that's just below that rating?
Yes. First, as you may have seen, unfortunately, some European Union countries themselves are sometimes rated just below or even, even clearly below investment grade level. So I think, it's Turkey is a growing economy. Public finance has improved in the last few years. So I think, again, what they are looking for is more signs to be confident and more signs that their interests are going to be protected. So I think that's what really would matter for now for the Turkish financial market.
Well, Turkish industry generally is flourishing, and you mentioned the financial market also. The banking sector, of course, has had almost a renaissance, if you like, with activity over the last 12 months, and that seems to be growing continually. So is that something that's attractive to your investors, the banking industry in particular?
It could be attractive, although I think retail investors in Europe are quite let's say, reserves vis-à-vis the financial sector, not specifically the Turkish financial sector, but because of what happened in the financial crisis, where obviously the corporate governance of some financial institutions was below par. You had bankruptcies, and again, minority shareholders and small shareholders lost a lot of money with quite a few big banks collapses in Europe. So they're going to be watching very, warily the banking sector. It's not specific to Turkey, but they will be wary.
Let's have a look at Turkey still. And for investments in Turkey, what criteria do you think, or what safeguards do you think that the government here could put into place to help to encourage investment in Turkey?
Again, I think Turkey looks attractive right now, so it is the right time to show that small investors or retail investors will get approximately or equivalent transparency provisions and rights protection. Again, I would refer to maybe two directives from the European Union: the Shareholders' Rights Directive from 2007 for minority shareholders protection, and this Markets in Financial Instruments Directive, where you have a lot of provisions covering selling practices, product disclosures, and that kind of things.
Turkey's most aggressive trading partners are the US and the three top European economies. So what's the view of investors, do you think, with Turkey embracing a much closer relationship with the Middle East?
Then I don't have, a corporate view on this, but my personal view would be that it's quite good because it gives Turkey a more diversified client base. Of course, Middle East may not be seen as stable as the other economies you mentioned, although with the crisis, some of these economies were also a disappointment sometimes.
Indeed. Do you think Turkey could provide a springboard or a stepping stone into these other markets, do you think, for European investors?
Definitely. I think, Turkey is really, in fact, even geographically speaking, one step in Europe, one step in Asia. So I think they are ideally positioned for that. Yeah.
If you look at the troubles in the Middle East, the uncertainty, the instability of a number of countries now, where we're seeing lots of unrest, that must be of great concern to investors in that region, given the level of that unrest.
Yes, this is quite worrying, although it is also full of promises and hopes. If these democratic moves succeed, But of course, right now it is, investors. What investors hate most is uncertainty, and there is a high level of uncertainty right now in quite a few Middle East countries. Yes.
Let's look at Turkey's other neighbours now. We take a look at the Balkans, for example, which is an area that Turkey has a tremendous amount of interest in and lots of investment. Is that an area as well that people in the European Union would be interested in?
Yes, in fact, the whole Central European and Eastern Europe has been a focus of investors for the last decade at least. And as you know, there were new members to the European Union coming from that region. In fact, all of them almost. So yes, I think it's a very interesting area.
Well, other countries joining the European Union, let's take a look at Turkey's position on that now. It would like to be part of the European Union. I think Mr. Sarkozy is one person who is a dissenter and feels that Turkey perhaps is better serving itself as a singular economy and not part of the Union. Do you have a view on that?
Well, first, as you know, Euro shareholders has a definitive view because we made our Turkish member a full member last year, and so for Euro shareholders, it's clearly part of Europe. In terms of political positions, that's not up to me to comment. I could say, that probably, most certainly, in fact, economically and financially, the European Union would benefit from having Turkey. The question is, would Turkey benefit from that? I think that's another question.
Let's take a look again at the financial services sector. We touched on banking for a moment. What about insurance? That's a very large business across Europe. How do you see that business transmuting to Turkey in terms of investment levels?
You mean in terms of investing into insurance
into insurance businesses?
Yeah, I think this is a high potential and a high growth area, especially for a high growth country and also a high growth of the population rate like Turkey. So probably there are a lot of opportunities. Insurance business is also a bit tricky because in terms of managing risks, but that's what insurance is about. But so yeah, I would say it's certainly a promising sector.
One of the largest issues to befall the financial services sector is credit card abuse or overextending on credit cards and credit card debt. What position does the organization take on credit card debt?
So again, this is an area where we think financial services users need to be more protected. In fact, the financial crisis, as we all know, came from over-indebtedness, especially in the US in mortgages. So that's not credit card, but that's the same kind of problems. So we think the financial supervisor should be very, very careful on this and protect users from on one side, irresponsible lending, but also on the other side, irresponsible borrowing.
I don't want to be political and single out any one country. I did mention Mr. Sarkozy a little earlier, but France seems to have a very strong financial or control of the financial services sector, not allowing people to overextend with mortgages, for example. Is that the sort of strong legislation that is likely to be legislated in the near future across Europe?
I don't see it coming across Europe, although, as you said, the member states of Europe have had very different experiences in terms of controlling consumer credit and mortgage credit. If you look at France on the one side and Spain on the other side, for example, where there are extended mortgage credit and with severe problems right now. I think it's more, as I said, more generally addressing responsible lending issues, whether it's consumers, but also local governments and even national governments.
If we look at some of those governments and the state of some of the countries, and I won't mention the obvious ones like Ireland, Greece, and Spain, but if we take those into account, surely the financial sectors in those countries are teetering on oblivion with the lack of controls.
Yeah, no, and that's a big concern for investors. For example, if you talk about not pointing fingers, of course, but like Irish banks, for example, that's a big concern, because we believe that either for these banks or for even some government bonds like the Greek ones, a restructuring is quite unavoidable. And again, we fear that this will be at the expense of the minority holders of bonds and not the big institutional ones who have had some insider information or some other action way before the crisis.
Well, we mentioned the banks of those countries, but even countries like Britain hasn't been immune from banking failures. I think the British government still owns a very large chunk of RBS. Where do investors, what's the investors' stand when a government would take over an institution like that? Are there great opportunities after that for the investor?
Well, certainly before that, there were very big, severe harm to investors. In fact, we have still a member who is suing a government for his takeover of a bank. It's to be very clear, it's the Netherlands when they bought back the ABN AMRO business of Fortis in the Netherlands at a very cheap price. Of course, previous investors, especially retail investors, suffered. Same thing for Royal Bank of Scotland. And so that is a big issue for investors because in that case, we are paying the price.
What's the link between Euro investors and Euro shareholders? It's part of the same organization or is it separate?
Yes, sorry, I mentioned Euro shareholders without explaining. Euro shareholders is an older organization. It was created in 1992 with shareholder associations and is a founding member of Euro Investors, which, as I said, was created following the financial crisis and feeling that we needed to address not only shareholder issues, but all individual investors' issues, so bondholders, fund holders, life policy insurance holders, pension fund participants, because they were all impacted. And also in the last few decades, I would say indirect investment has been favored by intermediaries. So 30 years ago, you would go to your bank, you would be offered, securities, bonds, or equity issues. Now you're more likely to be offered package products, investment funds, which are higher commissioned for the intermediaries. So you have more and more indirect investments from the retail side, from the individuals in Europe.
So can individuals approach either of the organizations for any advice, or is it purely institutional membership?
At the European level, it's purely institutional membership. Of course, we would not turn down an individual who calls, but we would direct her or him to his national association where it is physical members. Yes.
Okay. Cross-border pollination of investments across Europe, of course, is something that is very, very strong and keeps the financial bond of the European Union together. But that's also shown some cracks over the last few years, hasn't it? Particularly since 2008. So what cementing jobs can be done, and can your organisation help governments to cement that financial stability?
In fact, that's one of our top priorities. For example, in terms of shareholdings, we are launching the Eurovote project, which is to facilitate cross-border voting by individual shareholders. Because even though we are talking about a single market, it is still very difficult and sometimes very costly for shareholders to exercise their rights in a neighboring country. For example, a German shareholder of a French company is going to be very cumbersome. People say, but shareholders don't vote, don't exercise their rights, but people don't make it easy for them. So we are trying to improve this and to show to the European authorities what are still the problems and the hurdles, because I think we still need a lot of work to achieve the single financial market in the European Union.
Do you see any threat to the euro? That's often spoken about, and we read about it in financial magazines and trade papers and what have you. What's your view from the organisation's point of view?
First, there are obvious threats to the euro because I think what you are seeing with the Greek government bonds, Portuguese government bonds, Irish government bonds, it's also a speculation against the euro. The Europe first is fragmented politically, economically, and doesn't have a currency like the US dollar, which is an international way of payment. So yes, there is a concern there and a struggle there. Of course, we feel a single currency is good for investors because at least that simplifies transactions and reduces the cost of transactions when you want to invest in a cross-border. So we would like to see the euro doing well, but it is under threat, yes.
Well, Turkey's currency has remained stable since the revaluation some time ago, certainly stable against the euro in the last couple of years. Is the Turkish lira seen as a good currency to hold for investors?
For retail investors, I think in terms of foreign currencies, they are always, a bit wary just because they don't really know and understand the currencies markets. So in terms of individual investors, I don't think they would dare to be extensively exposed to the Turkish currency.
Turkish investors are quite prolific around the world. They pop up all over the place with some wonderful organizations and financial investments as well. In terms of attracting Turkish investors to Europe, what do you think your organization can do to ease the way or to make the path a little bit smoother for them?
That's a very good point because, as an international federation, we want to help each other in both ways. So I think the fact that, as I said very recently, we made the Turkish Investor Association a full member, then the next step, yes, is to see what we can bring to our Turkish investor friends, how we can help them. I think first thing we are communicating on this, and we will increase the communications because I'm sure, yes, there should be good opportunities as well for Turkish investors. So in fact, I'm sure in the next few days where we have meetings in Istanbul with our Turkish member, but also with some other stakeholders, we're gonna discuss that more thoroughly.
And finally, do you think that the Turkish landscape is right or ripe for investors from Europe now?
From my just personal experience for the last 2 days, I think so, yes. In fact, I was quite amazed because when I arrived at the airport, I had no visa and I was not required to have any visa. So it was very, very easy to come to Turkey, which is a very good sign for foreign investments.
Mr. Guillaume Prache, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
That's Mr. Guillaume Prache. He's the Managing Director of Euro Investors. I'm Stephen Marnie. This is The Executives. I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.